If we could have that first slide, please. This morning I want to talk to you about why Christianity is a factual faith. And are you able to find that? Oh, good. I can't see anything over here, so all right. Why Christianity is a factual faith. This is very important. You'll look at the scriptures over here, and you'll notice we're looking at Acts 1:3. One of the key verses is verse 8. But Acts 1:3 is very important. We know that if you read all the Gospels, it's very painstakingly clear Jesus was brutally tortured, and every Gospel indicates that he came back from the dead. But now I want you to look at verse 3 here. It's the Amplified. Notice what it says. It says, "To them he showed himself alive after his passion, his suffering in the garden and on the cross." Now look at this. "By a series of many convincing demonstrations, unquestionable evidences, and infallible proofs, appearing to them during 40 days and talking to them about the things of the kingdom of God." Now you see the word many convincing demonstrations, unquestionable evidences, and infallible proofs. In the Greek New Testament, that's tekmerios. And what it really is translated to mean, unquestionable evidences and infallible proofs. It means it is demonstrated in such a way that there can be no doubt whatever is being presented is actual and factual. Now, why is this important for me? Let's go back to March 1968. I'm a junior. I've had the opportunity of preaching in almost every weekend, it seems like, youth revivals, camps, and conferences. But to be quite honest with you, I'd gotten to the point where I didn't know whether God existed or not. And that's kind of being a spiritual schizophrenic, isn't it? Because you want people to come to Christ, but you don't even know if he's the Son of God. You know he existed historically. And does God exist? And so I couldn't go on this way. I mean, if God didn't exist, I'm changing my major, changing my school, and maybe the hippies were right. Just eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you may die. So I prayed what Billy Graham calls the Agnostics Prayer. You know what an agnostic is. That's someone who says God may exist or he may not exist. There's no way of knowing. And Billy Graham had this Agnostics Prayer where he basically, what you did is you prayed, okay, God, if you're there and Jesus is your Son, reveal yourself to me and I'll follow you forever. Well, I had what I called the Burkett Agnostics Prayer. It wasn't something that I took weeks to formulate. It just kind of was expressed out of my felt need. And so I said, God, and I don't know if I'm talking to air, but God, if you're there and Jesus really is your Son, would you reveal yourself to me and give me an immovable intellectual stake, something that cannot be disproved? And I really meant it. And so I prayed that prayer. Two nights later, I'm at the university library. You know why I'm at the university library? Because I have a term paper due the next morning, and I thought I should start on it. So we're just a few days from Easter when this takes place. I'm walking across the periodical section. I see a magazine I've never seen before called Christianity Today, and there's the cover. The story, the head story, is the historical evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. And I'm thinking it's probably some devotional message by some pastor, but I was stunned when I went over, picked it up to find out it was written by one of the leading legal minds of Great Britain. Matter of fact, he was the dean of the University of London. And Dr. Anderson said, what I'm going to share in this essay is just using the principles of historical research, what conclusion could scholars and historians come to looking at the evidence concerning the resurrection of Jesus Christ? We'll look at the betrayal, we'll look at the trial, we'll look at the execution, and we'll look at the purported resurrection. And so as it was, I read and I was stunned because about the next to the last paragraph, he just came out and said the only conclusion that men and women could come to, that scholars and historians could come to, is on the basis of the evidence. The only conclusion is somehow, some way, Jesus Christ came back from the dead in history. And when I read that, I thought I heard that shung. Now that introduced me to a subdiscipline called apologetics. Next frame, please. Apologetics does not mean going up to somebody and saying, would you please forgive me? I'm a follower of Jesus and I love God and I believe God exists. Apologetics, the key verse is 1 Peter 3:15. Sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts, always being ready to make a defense. That's where we get the word apologetics. It's based on that. It's translated that way in that translation. Notice, make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an account for the hope that is in you, yet with gentleness and reverence. Now, I'm telling you, you might be saying, this is just kind of a side discipline. I really don't need to be involved in apologetics. Do you realize that the greatest apologist who ever lived was Jesus? Are you aware of the fact that in Acts 1:3, here is Jesus? What was he doing when he was showing many infallible proofs those 40 days? We call that apologetics. It's not only just defending the faith, it means you're making the case for the intellectual factuality of the worldview claims or the claims of Jesus. And so Jesus was saying I'm God the Son. By the way, here's proof. Can you imagine being there and maybe he's making a gesture and his sleeves come down and you see the nail prints? And he's teaching on the kingdom of God. And then you might be saying, well, that's just an isolated situation. He was attacked by the intellectuals all through his ministry. And you remember he'd say things like, if you don't believe my words, then believe my works. I mean, Jesus was the greatest apologist. Next frame, please. That also brings us to understanding about faith. The frame that's after this one, please. The next frame. Yes. So we need to define, what do we mean by faith? Now, I pastored 34 years in university communities. And I would have sometimes professors and grad students come up to me and they'd say, oh, you've got your faith. Wish I had faith like you. And I've just got the facts. And I knew immediately they were defining faith not the way the Bible did. By the way, brothers and sisters, we must not let our culture define our terms. It was Confucius who said if he was the ruler of the whole world, the first thing he would do is bring everyone together and settle on the definition of terms, because actions follow definitions. And so we need to be able to understand not only the truthfulness of biblical Christianity and its claims, but to be able to say not only what is marriage and not only what is gender identity. I never thought we'd ever have that battle in our culture, but we need to make certain that they understand what faith is. Faith is not wishful thinking. Faith is not believing the unbelievable. Faith is not clinging to your convictions when all evidence is against you. Faith is not a leap into darkness. Next frame, please. Biblical faith is conviction-based. Biblical faith is an active trust in God. Now, I want you to look up this way, and I know if some of you think I look like Sean Connery, you'll probably fall for other delusions as well. But I want you to listen to me on this. You see, active faith cannot be manufactured or worked up. It is based on evidence. When Moses went to Pharaoh and said, let my people go, Pharaoh didn't say, well, by what authority? And Moses didn't say, well, you just got to take it by faith. He didn't do that, did he? No. God did something in his life with an old dead stick, threw it down, and there was evidence that God had spoken. And by the way, every time the 10 plagues occurred, right after each plague, there was this term, so that they might know that there was a God in Israel. What was it that Simon Peter preached on Pentecost? He preached, we are all witnesses of these things, both believers and unbelievers. So faith, biblical faith, is based on evidence. All right, next frame, please. Now, this is a very important thing in terms of understanding apologetics, because, brothers and sisters, we're losing our young people because they believe that faith is wishful thinking. And they need to understand we're talking about truth. Now listen to me. If we do not stand and understand the factuality of the Christian faith, you don't have any evangelism. You don't have any discipleship. Forget missions. And what's the use to get together for church? Maybe it's just a social club. But if it is true, not only is it something that we can have a confident Christianity, but it's something that we can offer gladly to everyone.